Definitely. And we're also in a hurry to engage in that discussion. And I would like to invite all the experts and there we are. Yeah, I think we're going to have all of you here. So both Markus Wråke and Kenneth Carlsen, who have presented the key messages from the report, together with Mona Mølvik, Oras Tynkkynen, and Birte Holst Joergensen, because it's time to answer some questions from the audience. And I have to say, it's been boiling out there on Slido. So what we've done, realizing that we won't have time to go all through the questions, some of the questions have been answered directly in Slido, as you can see. And by the end of a week or so, all questions will be answered nevertheless. But I would like to have some perspectives from the panel on one of the trending questions, which is, what do you think? And this is to all of you, so I just will ask you to raise a finger to show me whether you want to reply to it. What do you think are the main barriers to reach carbon neutrality in the Nordic region in each of the three scenarios? And Markus, he's already replied shortly to that, and he says that it's a big question. But to the rest of the panel, what do you think? Is it the cost? Is it policy? What is it? Or is it technology? Oras first, and then Birte. Go ahead, Oras.
Well, incidentally, actually, just a couple of weeks ago, Sitra released a study looking at specifically that question, but in the Finnish context. And I recognize that there are differences, important differences between the 5 Nordic countries, but I think many of the main conclusions will still apply to the whole Nordic region. And we will start with the lack of clarity and vision about where we need to go. We have the carbon neutrality targets, but we don't necessarily have separate targets for sinks or negative emissions. We don't necessarily have sectoral targets, and we don't necessarily have the pathway to those very long-term targets. We very often lack incentives for some very key solutions. We talked about negative emissions and CCS. We don't have the incentives in place for those solutions to be attractive from a purely commercial perspective. So we need to introduce the incentives. And then finally, I would just add the different kind of bureaucratic permitting legal obstacles to making the necessary investments. Those are still quite significant in some regards.
Thank you, Oras. Birte, you were fast in raising your hand, so go ahead.
Yes, I think it's important to emphasize that there's path dependency associated with energy infrastructure. It takes time to change the course of this very, very heavy container ship. So what matters is political commitment and courage. But in order to do that, I think it's important to have Nordic lighthouse projects. And just to mention a few, it matters that Norway, long time ago, has invested in the Sleipner storage of CO2. It matters when Denmark, for example, invest now heavily into energy islands. I'm a little bit more undecided what I think about the investment of 11 floating wind turbines, the high winds Tampen, to deliver clean electricity so that they can take out more oil and gas from the North Sea. But I think these lighthouse projects actually matters very much.
Thank you, Birte. And that's the latter point you made is, of course, a part of a huge discussion. And I've seen questions raised about that as well here. So we'll just have to, I think we have to move on a little bit now. And I saw that Mona as well, you raised your hand, didn't you? Yes.
Yes, I support what has been mentioned and about having a direction, not just setting emission targets in 2050. And I think we will see it's not about carbon neutrality, but net zero CO2 emissions. I think we will meet that requirement before we reach 2050. And actually to plan and which investments and which development do we need to do now to reach the emission targets in 2050. We can't just continue to shuffle those ambitions ahead of us.
A question regarding the Nordic perspective as well. To what extent is it feasible that we can agree on tracks together, Nordic tracks, for instance, for CCS pathways or hydrogen production, for instance? Do you have any comments on that? And I'm looking at the screen to see if there are. Yep, Mona.
Yes. We are now in Norway. We have Sleipner, we have Snøhvit, where almost 1 million ton of CO2 has been captured and stored in Sleipner for 24 years or 25. And now the project Longship is under development, and there will be captured CO2 from the cement plant at Brevik in this project, and hopefully from the waste incineration at Klemetsrud into and captured, transported by ship along the coast and stored at under the sea bed in the North Sea. So this project is developed in a way that it has a transport and storage facility which is open for other sources, and of course also open for the other Nordic countries. So going more into developing scenarios and ambitions for this Longship project and how to connect to this project from the other Nordic countries, I think that would be very interesting.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm looking at the panel now and also looking at the time, and we are running out of time more or less because we have another section that we would like to present to you as well. So I think for now, we're going to say thank you so much to Markus Wråke and Kenneth Carlson for presenting the messages, and also to the rest of the panel, Mona Mølnik, Oras Tynkkynen and Birte Holst Joergensen, for participating and sharing your views and perspectives. It has been greatly interesting to listen to, and I know that the audience have enjoyed it as well, as there are many, many questions being asked, and they will be replied to in a few days.